My next guest is the ranking member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Congressman Rick Larsen joins me now. Congressman Larsen, thanks for joining us. Let me first start with some news of the day. Congressman, you've seen a lot of State of the Unions. Last night, pretty rowdy. Your reaction, how unique was that?
Oh, well, it's not unique if you're the House of Commons in the UK, but it's fairly unique for the United States. And I think generally the shouting and trying to shout down or interrupt the president was seen from the public as rude, frankly. That said, the message that the president came with was fairly impressive, with 12 million jobs created over the last 2 years, the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, near historic low unemployment rates for Black Americans and Hispanic Americans. Inflation is still too high, but it's clearly coming down. Gas prices still too high, but clearly coming down. And a lot of things are headed in the right direction. I think the president made that point very clearly. So I can see why people are a little frustrated to hear the truth. As you know, what Harry Truman said, some guy said, "Give him a hell, Harry." He's just said, "I'm just telling them the truth. They think it's hell." So that's where we are.
Well, one of the things that the president mentioned last night in the State of the Union was the bipartisan transportation bill, and I was a skeptic of whether that was going to get over the finish line, and it did. It wasn't easy. But right now, as I mentioned, you're the top Democrat on the Transportation Committee. Transportation has been traditionally bipartisan. It was bipartisan in the last Congress, but it was also partisan. That's why it was tough getting the votes. What are the priorities you see going forward, and are you optimistic that in this new Congress with House Republicans running the place, it can be bipartisan?
Well, I think the first thing I want to say is there was this joke in Congress about every week being infrastructure week because we were trying to get this bill done. And the president said the next decade will be infrastructure decade. I don't want to wait that long. Literally, in my district, every day is infrastructure day. We are putting the bill to work. We're putting the law to work, creating jobs in roads and bridges, highways, and investing in low and no emission transit as well. Then there's all the other side of this on the broadband investment side. So there's a lot of good things going on with the bill and its implementation, which goes to your question, like how do you keep bipartisanship going? The chair of the committee has said that the bipartisan infrastructure law is the law of the land. He's not interested in rolling it back. That said, I do expect some oversight on some key issues that the majority will want to look at, but I welcome that because I think we have a good story to tell on the investments that are being made on building an infrastructure system, a transportation system that's safer, that's cleaner, that's greener, and more accessible to everyone. And so I think we can welcome oversight because there's a good story to tell.
As far as the role of electric vehicles, where are we now, and where are we going to be, you think, in 5 years or so, and what has to happen in that interim, because the Biden administration does have this ambitious goal of getting to half of new cars being EVs by 2030. That's actually not that far off.
It's not that far off, and look at the numbers in Washington State, in my home state. In 2018, about 30,000 cars were registered electric vehicles. 3 years later, in 2021, about 66,000 electric vehicles were registered. And beginning of this year, about 110,000 cars are registered as electric vehicles. So those numbers are increasing. I haven't done the math to see if they're increasing enough because, the 14 to 16 million cars are sold every year in the United States. So that would mean 7 to 8 million cars would be EVs being sold by 2030. So it is quite an ambitious goal, but when you look at Washington State's numbers, you can kind of start doing some math and think, well, maybe it's there. To make it happen, though, you need to have the supporting infrastructure. It's not just having an electric vehicle. You yourself at home, you need to be able to charge it. You need to be able to feel confident that when you travel, that there's a charging infrastructure network available to you as well. And so that's really, I think, the linchpin to achieving this goal, is having that charging infrastructure network.
Let me get my colleague Rachel Frazin in here for the next question for you, Congressman.
Great. Thanks, Bob. I was wondering, Congressman, as EV deployment ramps up, we're going to need a lot of minerals to get that done. Where should we be getting those minerals from? Should we be ramping up domestic mining here in the States?
I don't have an answer on whether we should start mining in the States, but certainly we need to look at our options that are safe. They're from secure countries. They're from countries that are friendly to the United States, or that don't pose problems, or won't be trapped by arbitrary decisions from those countries where a lot of this is coming from. And there are countries that fulfill that goal. I do think that as the market for EV increases, that as more people demand electric vehicles, and therefore the power sources for electric vehicles, that the question that you've asked will get some more definition. But I don't have an answer for you on that today.
Congressman, as far as I want to talk about kind of the price and affordability of EVs. They're still expensive. How does that factor in? How do you make them affordable? I know over time things go down in price, but also this is an equity issue. We want to have EVs available to all. How do policymakers make that happen?
Yeah, I think the role of tax incentives that are in the Inflation Reduction Act are very important to help make EVs affordable for more people. So maintaining those tax incentives, not rolling back those tax incentives as some have said they want to do, I think is important in order to achieve this. And remember that equity takes many forms. I have found that when I ran for ranking member, equity takes many forms. And the equity of living in communities that have historically been, targets of polluters is important. So investing in low and no emission transit is going to be critical as part of the equity issue. Investing in cleaner ports, so communities around our ports are not subject to diesel emitting bunker fuel from ships that are idling, but rather you invest in the charging infrastructure at our ports so that ships that are idling can plug into electricity instead of burning fuel. And then obviously access to electric vehicles is part of that. But again, I would argue only part of that. And I think the challenge is to ensure that the market grows enough so that there are, much like we have in the carbon fuel industry for vehicles, that there are choices at a lot of price levels. But we're not there yet. But I didn't expect that we would be there in February 2023 by now. But over time, that's what the goal ought to be, because I think the market will bear that, and the market will demand that.
As far as implementation, the congressional media press that they focus on legislation and then it passes. But what are you looking for with the implementation of the IRA and the infrastructure bill? It's going to take years to do some of this stuff. But what are you watching in the next year or two that are key, because it doesn't get the attention it deserves, but implementation is very important.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, we passed the legislation, and then some members of Congress said, their hands they're done, they're good, they're ready to go. Some of the press treats it that way as well. But the interesting thing about both the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law, they're multi-year bills, and the implementation is just as important as the act of passing it. And that's why I say every day is Infrastructure Day in my district, because there are opportunities to implement the bipartisan infrastructure law every day. Washington State has received money to begin electrifying its ferry service. We have the single largest ferry system in the country for a state based on vehicles traveled and people traveled. And so electrifying that ferry fleet is an important part of cleaning up the diesel emissions of the State Department of Transportation. So that's happening. But we're also low and no emission investment in buses and transit that is taking place. We have traditional everyday transportation being done. Washington State's getting $620 million for bridge repair and bridge replacement, bridge rehabilitation money over the next 5 years. So we have bridge rehabilitation projects that will be taking place. All this over 5 years. And frankly, I want to be at every single ribbon cutting, and I encourage every member of Congress, whether or not they voted for the bill, because I know some people who didn't vote for the bill who will still be at the ribbon cuttings, but out there saying, like, this is happening because we took a major step to pass the bipartisan infrastructure law to invest in this country, which makes us more competitive relative to other countries, including China. It invests in a long-term economic growth of the United States. The same goes for the provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, which again, just starting to get implemented. Tax credits will just start to be available this year. And we need to, I think, in Congress, those of us who are interested in this need to tout that these actions did take place because of the vote that we took, but also that there's a lot more to come. I say the bipartisan infrastructure law is not a set it and forget it law. We have 4 more years of implementation, $480 billion in the jurisdiction of the Transportation Committee alone, much less another $400 billion plus of implementation in other committees along, when you look at broadband, you look at drinking water improvements and so on. So there's a lot of work left to do, and the members of Congress should be out in their districts touting these investments, talking about these investments, and directly connecting the passage of this law to the job creation that will be taking place in their districts.
Yep, a lot of work to be done. Congressman, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.